Hi Dexter, what are we doing? What is all this? Oh, hello. Hi. Oh, you're gonna compare with me? I'm gonna tell them which one's the best. Hi everyone! In this video I'm gonna do something a little different, kind of video that I haven't yet done before. It's going to be about YSL's infamous Touche Eclat and comparisons to other under eye brightener type products from other brands, both high-end brands, mid-range brands, and drugstore brands. And I'm going to kind of give you comparisons, tell you if I think any of them can be dupes for Touche Eclat, and overall give you my thoughts on whether one particular product is worth investing in, and among all of them, which one is the best. And the reason I'm doing this is because I just think at the end of the day, Touche Eclat is so overrated and I just think that there are much better alternatives out there on the market. And I've done a lot of reviews for these kinds of products, so I thought it would be helpful to you guys to give you a comprehensive overview, ball all of them up into one video that you can use to compare and decide for yourself, or maybe get some insights from me on my personal experience with all of these and a decision on which one is worth it. As always, you can go to allurabeauty.com. Individual reviews for each separate product that I will show you will be up on the website for you to read and see swatches of. A couple of them I have decided not to do reviews for just because they have been discontinued. They're not available anymore to purchase, but I'll give you basically a verdict on those anyway in case you happen to have them or somehow acquire them. I will do very quick swatches of these side by side so you can kind of see for yourself, but I'll also include photographed swatches, which may be a little easier for you to see a comparison of the colors and the finishes and the coverage, etc. For those of you wondering, on my lips I'm wearing NARS's brand new Audacious lipstick. I'm wearing the shade Marissa, and a swatch video for the colors of the new Audacious lipstick line shades will be going up, or depending on when this video goes up, it may already have been published, and if so, I will link it here for you. If not, then just keep an eye out on the channel for that video going up. Please subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on videos like these. Sneak peeks to a bunch of upcoming MAC collections will be in the description box below. Let's dive into the world of under eye brighteners / concealers. Okay, so let's start out with just sharing my thoughts on YSL's Touche Eclat. If you are only vaguely familiar or not familiar at all, this is said to be a luminizing product. Now, it's not specifically for concealing, so it's not an under eye concealer, but it is said to sort of brighten and illuminate the skin. So many people do use it sometimes under the eye, in the inner corners, and to do some subtle luminizing or highlighting on the cheekbones, on the nose, Cupid's bow, anywhere that you would want to bring a little bit of brightness to the face. The shade that I have is 1.5, which is good for light skin that has yellow undertones. But honestly, what I found with this product, it has a pretty thin, liquidy formula, and it really blends away to pretty much nothing. If you looked really closely and were deliberately looking for some sort of luminizing effect, you would kind of be able to see a brightening effect on the skin. But when you photograph this, if I did half of my face with this on and half of it with it not on, you honestly can't really tell a difference. And this costs $41 for this product, and I really don't think it's worth it. I just don't think that a product that is that subtle to the effect that it pretty much does nothing is worth $41. It comes in a clicky pen with a brush applicator, and as you can see, it is a yellow toned light color. And I'm putting this in the center of my hand because I'm going to swatch the other products on top of and below the YSL Touche Eclat so that you can compare the finishes and the colors. I'm gonna start by comparing the higher end brands that offer kind of similar products to this. And when I say high-end, I am including more expensive brands, but I'm pretty much excluding anything that's not a drugstore brand. So for example, I have one by Sephora, which obviously is not a high-end brand, but it is going to be more expensive than a drugstore alternative. And I just want to make clear that for the purpose of this video, I am going to focus on the use of the products under the eyes to illuminate, brighten, and waken up the eyes. So even though the Touche Eclat is used in other ways to brighten up the complexion, like on the cheeks or on the nose, etc., I'm going to focus on, for this video, the use under the eyes. And YSL does specifically state, I'm reading from the company description, Touche Eclat banishes shadows and tired-looking eyes by adding light and creating an instant lift to the eye area, which I didn't really find to be true because I didn't really find there to be much of an effect at all. But for the purpose of comparison and finding dupes, that's what I'm concentrating on. And that is a product released by Kate Somerville. It is called the Illumi-Kate Concealing Eye Cream, and this retails for $42. So it's even more expensive than YSL's Touche Eclat, which contains 0.1 ounce of product. This is not only $1 more, but contains 0.08 ounces. So even more expensive than YSL's Touche Eclat. This has a very thin, almost liquidy cream formula, and because of that formula, it applies pretty sheerly. You don't get much coverage from this. I have the shade 01 Light, so mostly because of the lightness of the shade, it does brighten up the under eye area, but it has a formula that I find is a little finicky. The only way that I can get this to not look kind of patchy and not make it look like it's sitting over dry patches in my under eye area is to pat it in with my fingers. I've tried this with a brush, I've tried it with a beauty blender sponge, and those, which normally work perfectly fine, seem to make this formula look patchy or streaky on my skin. So I'm not the hugest fan of this, particularly given the price point. And it does have the same sort of brush applicator as the YSL Touche Eclat. Next up is Clinique's Airbrush Concealer, and this is in the one I have is in the shade 04 Neutral Fair, and once again this comes with a brush applicator, as for some reason seems to be the pattern with these kinds of products. This one costs $19.50. and you get 0.05 ounces of product. I like this better than both Touche Eclat and Kate Somerville's product. I'm not blown away by it. It does have also a thin cream formula that blends out nicely. It gives you pretty light coverage, so if you have any under eye darkness, you will still need to use a concealer, but if you only have minor shadows underneath your eyes, then this could be used alone to cover up that, give you just a little bit of coverage, and to brighten up the eye area. And the shade is good for people with yellow undertones like me who have light skin. Next is Bare Minerals Stroke of Light Eye Brightener / Illuminator, and I have the shade Luminous 2. I think there are only a few shades of this product, and one of the only ones that doesn't have that clicky pen or twisty pen with a brush. This very thankfully has a pinched doe-footed applicator, and this also has much more product. It has 0.18 fluid ounces and it costs $22. Again, this is a good match for yellow undertones with light skin colors, and the consistency is a thin cream formula that blends in nicely, sets nicely, gives you a little bit of coverage and a little bit of a brightening effect. Again, the overall effect is pretty subtle, and I have to say that the formula and consistency and performance of these two products is pretty similar. There's not a lot of differences between the Clinique one and the Bare Minerals one. So if you're going to choose between these two, I would definitely go with Bare Minerals. It doesn't have the fussy, clicky, twisty brush applicator thing, and it is much cheaper. You get more product, a lot more product, and only for a little bit more in terms of absolute dollars. So per ounce, this is much cheaper than the Clinique one. Next is Benefit's Oola Lift, which is much different in color from any of the other ones we're going to see in this video. This has a thin liquidy formula also, but it has a sheer pink color to it, which can provide some sort of brightening when you think of the color. The problem with this is that it absolutely does nothing. It is so sheer in pigmentation, and the thin formula just blends out honestly into nothingness, and it literally does nothing visible that I can see to my under eye area. So unfortunately, although interesting in concept, in practice this really doesn't give you any sort of brightening or eye lifting effect in the under eye area. If anything, YSL's Touche Eclat gives a much more noticeable effect compared to Benefit's Oola Lift. So I definitely wouldn't recommend this. And just for reference, if you're interested, this is 0.25 ounces, which is much more product than the other items and costs $22. But again, you may as well, for me at least, may as well have not put anything in the under eye area. All right, very quickly, I'm not going to get too in depth into Missha's Prism Spot Flash Brightener in this shade Beige. Another clicky pen that we have here. I'm not going to say too much about this other than that I wasn't very impressed with it, just because they don't sell this anymore. And last, for the quote-unquote high-end or more expensive brand brighteners, is Sephora's Smoothing and Brightening Concealer. This contains 0.11 ounces and costs $17. This also has that flat brush applicator, and the shade that I tested was the second shade, the light shade. And surprisingly, of all of the more expensive brand ones that I've tried, this one is the most impressive, the one by Sephora. It has a thicker formula to it. It's not thick, but it's more thick than the very thin liquidy formulas that I talked about with the other under eye brighteners. So it has a medium consistency liquidy or cream formula, and it dries to a relatively matte finish, and it provides more noticeable coverage and a brightening effect than the other ones that I just talked about. This also I found was very long wearing, so it didn't lose the effect that it had as the day went on. So of all the ones, if you're going to buy one at Sephora, I would actually recommend Sephora's brand of smoothing and brightening under eye concealer. And now I'm going to show you 4 drugstore alternatives, and they are all, to my knowledge, still available at your local drugstore. And I'm going to start with L'Oreal's Magic Lumi Highlighter. Prices for these will vary just depending on where you're purchasing it, but it's around $13. No surprise you get your brush applicator with the twisty pen. And I tested the shade Light, which is pretty much, it's pretty noticeable, the difference between my skin and this shade. It is noticeably lighter, but it's not so much lighter that it looks ghostly, I would say. This also has a thin cream formula, although it is thicker in consistency than YSL's Touche Eclat. And this does leave a noticeable brightening effect on the under eye that stays pretty consistent throughout the day. But I will say that the formula just didn't blend in as seamlessly as I would like to in the under eye area. The L'Oreal one also contains alcohol in it at the top of the ingredients list, and alcohol will tend to dry out the skin, which in your under eye area in particular you don't want, so that's another sort of negative mark against this product. Next up is by Maybelline. This is the Dream Lumi Touch Highlighting Concealer. Notice any sort of similarities between these two? This one contains the same amount, 0.05 ounces, but it's much cheaper. It's usually around $8 for this one. This one has also a thin cream formula, but it has sort of almost like a gel-like hint of a texture to it, so the formula isn't exactly the same as L'Oreal's. This is in the shade that I tested, in the shade Nude, which is a good match for my skin. It does provide a noticeable, but, you know, again, light brightening effect on the under eye area. And it gives you a little bit of coverage, but again, if you have anything except for minor shadows under the eyes, then you'll want to use a concealer also. When you compare the two of these, absolutely I would go with Maybelline's instead of L'Oreal's, both because it doesn't contain alcohol, but it has a better formulation to it also. Next, we have Neutrogena's Healthy Skin Brightening Eye Perfector, once again with our notorious brush applicator. This contains 0.17 ounces, so it is more expensive. It's around $13, but per ounce it is much cheaper. Now, I've tested the shade Buff, which is definitely not a good color match. It has a distinct gray cast to it, which, especially if you're trying to brighten up an area of your face, is not a good idea to put in a shade. So this definitely did not have a good color for the purpose of brightening or luminizing. It has a pretty thin liquid formula, and even aside from the grayish color, I didn't find that this provided any sort of coverage or noticeable luminizing effect under the eyes. And the last product is by Physicians Formula. This is the Nude Wear Nude Glow Touch of Glow. This contains a little less product, 0.14 ounces, at the same price point, around $13 as the Neutrogena one. Again, you get your brush applicator. And this also has a very thin formula. The luminizing effect is very sheer, just like with a lot of these products that I've been talking about. What I will say about this is that it does look very natural on the skin, but again, it's not going to give you any concealing effect. But if you already have concealer under your eyes and you just want a very natural brightening effect, or especially in the inner corners, then this is a good option for you. Otherwise, it's not going to pack any sort of strong punch in terms of brightening the under eye area. And I will say that this one in the shade Nude Glow is actually kind of on the dark side. It is darker in pigmentation or in color than my own skin, but the pigmentation is so sheer that that doesn't really have that much of an impact. I feel like if there are lighter shades in this range, then that will give you a more luminizing or brightening effect just from the fact that it will be a lighter pigment in the product. Okay, I'm quickly going to swatch all of these on my hand so you can kind of get an idea of how they compare to YSL's Touche Eclat. But I will also include the link to Allura Beauty where I took photographs of the swatches and did a written review or comprehensive thoughts on what I thought about comparisons. And that might give you a more clear photograph of the comparisons of the swatches if you're interested in that. And these swatches are going to be sort of blended out instead of just on application. So there is the Kate Somerville one. You can see it's much lighter in color. Next up is Clinique's, which is distinctly more yellow toned and it has more coverage. There's the Bare Minerals one, even more yellow undertoned. Next to that is Ula Lift, which I'm not even sure you can really see on there because it is so transparent. And on the end there is Sephora's. Alright, starting in the next row there is L'Oreal's. Next to that is Maybelline's. Next to that is Neutrogena's, which is probably a little hard to see because it is very sheer. And then last here on the end is Physicians Formula's. So even from a distance here, you can probably tell that this one, which is Sephora's, has the most brightening effect of all of them. And that's not just the lightness in the pigmentation, because some of these other ones actually turned up a lot lighter on my skin than the Sephora one did. But this one still has enough coverage and opacity along with the brightness to have that luminizing effect. I shouldn't say luminizing, I should say brightening effect on the under eye area. So do I think that any of these, both high-end or drugstore brand products, are a dupe for YSL's Touche Eclat? Not really. I think in formulation, in terms of the consistency and just sort of the effect that the product has, Physicians Formula's brightener is actually the closest in terms of consistency and formulation and how it kind of sets on the skin. But I think YSL's Touche Eclat has a more noticeable brightening effect than Physicians Formula's brightener does. So in that sense, it is not as strong. But honestly, if you're not looking to pay $40 and you want to pay more like $13, the difference between the two of them is small enough that I wouldn't want to dish out $40 as opposed to the $13. So at the end of the day, I don't know that any of these are really a dupe, because I think YSL's Touche Eclat brings in its luminizing effect, not in color, but in just the brightening nature of the formula. And this is really hard to explain. I think what I'm trying to say is that these other brighteners that I'm showing you, they impart their luminizing effect in most part because of the lighter pigmentation of the color. And of course, if you're putting something lighter on top of something darker, you're going to make it look more bright and luminized. And YSL's Touche Eclat doesn't exactly utilize that. Of course, depending on which shade you get, it may be lighter than the color of your under eye area, and that will help just inherently. But it also has the luminizing particles in it that very, very subtly help to luminize the skin. So I haven't found anything that does a good job of giving those luminizing particles and of having the brightening effect of a lighter concealer type of product. Part of the confusing part of Touche Eclat, I think, is that it tries to make too many claims. It says that it is a brightener for the under eye, but then it's also a luminizer, but then it's also like a complexion enhancer. And really those are kind of different functionalities. A luminizing product is something that is kind of like highlighting your face or bringing a shimmery quality to the face without really using shimmer or using very, very finely milled shimmer that you kind of almost can't see. While a brightening effect is more of a color thing. It can also include luminization, but it's a subtly but importantly different concept. And brightening comes more through pigmentation, color correction, things like that. And so that may be part of why it's kind of hard to compare Touche Eclat with other products, because I think most of the products, their under eye area products, focus more on brightening, which is kind of what they should do because you're trying to counteract darkness with brightness. And so I just want to make a note about that being something that's a little hard to compare in a true sense. Now, if you aren't looking for a dupe of Touche Eclat and you're just interested in finding out what the best luminizing or brightening under eye cream product is, my vote would go to Sephora's Brightening and Smoothing Concealer. It's at a reasonable price point, and of all of the ones that I've tested, it has the most noticeable effect in both brightening and coverage, and has the nicest set. It sets the most nicely of all of them, and it lasts the longest too. If you want to stay in the drugstore range, I think the best of the four that I have tested would be Maybelline's Dream Lumi Illuminator for the under eye area. Okay, so there are my comparisons and thoughts for YSL's Touche Eclat. I hope this was helpful to you. I know it was kind of in a weird format, but not only, or not even mainly, to give you my ideas on comparisons to YSL's Touche Eclat, but more importantly, I think just to give you an idea of other options out there that are more effective for brightening the under eye area. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope this is helpful to you. Please subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Lessen the oil production of your skin, and in fact can encourage the skin to produce more oil later on. So don't take the route of trying to scrub your skin off or dry it off really severely. That's not good for your skin, and it doesn't solve the problem. How much oil your skin produces is determined by your hormones, which are in turn determined pretty much entirely by genetics. And so it's not something that you can control by doing something to the surface of your skin. And so doing those kinds of things, like really scrubbing at it or trying to use drying agents on it, doesn't actually affect the cause of the oil that's coming out from underneath the skin. So